If you remove the skin and just ferment the juice of black skin grapes, you're going to get a colorless wine. Or if you have a shorter skin contact, you'll have a pink colored wine.
And then once it goes bad, can it be used in anything?
Yeah, you can.
I think they use beer to wash hair.
Yeah, that's flat beer. Wine you can use for salad dressings, or you can use it in gravies where you would. There are 10,000 varieties of wine that have been of wine grapes that have been identified
so far.
Yeah, and these are only wine grapes because this is a different family from the grapes we eat as fruit salad or as a fruit.
Yeah. Namaskar. Welcome to the Meeting Point podcast. I'm Sarika, founder and host of this podcast, and also yoga teacher by profession. Now, I'm sure you're all gearing up for the festivities, right? New Year's and Christmas, which is around the corner. And probably wine is going to be part of your celebration as well. Okay. So we know it is a little complex process to choose which wine to go for, which is good, which will suit my taste buds and everything, right? So to make your job easy, for today's podcast, we have invited Sujata Patil, a wine expert. Okay. She has been part of the Indian wine industry for many years. She's lived in France, been part of the wine culture there. So in today's conversation and in today's podcast, she's going to talk about all the different wines that are available, how to choose the right wine, what is wine all about, how is it made, and much more. Okay? So do watch till the end and share your thoughts and comments, and I hope you enjoy watching it. Let's begin. Hi Sujata, welcome to the Meeting Point podcast.
Hi,
thank you for having me.
Thank you for having me.
I had to. I want to learn about winemaking.
Wow. Well, I'm not a winemaking expert,
I know.
I can tell you a little bit about how it is made.
Yeah, you've just been humble about it.
I'm not a technically trained person. I'm trained more on the marketing and sales side. But to market something, you need to know how it's made. So
yeah.
I have that base at least.
Absolutely. So when you say, whenever there's a mention of wine, the first image that comes in my head is, the ones I've seen in movies where all men and women are standing inside the vat and stomping the grapes. I mean, that's how it was made traditionally, right?
Yes.
Do any countries still follow that anymore?
No, because it can contaminate the wine, which is, it's not just the fact that people will obviously clean their feet before doing something like that, but still you can have fungus, you can have stuff like that. So that is no longer done. That's only done as a marketing activity,
recreational.
In wine festivals and things, people have these small tubs where they fill them up with grapes, and that's only, representational, symbolic.
Yeah. Okay. But otherwise now processes have changed. Right?
Processes have changed for quite a bit now, and most of it is done in very, very sterilized tanks, sterilized press machines, all of that. Of course, they don't sterilize it like a hospital operation theatre, but it's all cleaned out before the machines are put to use. Pressing happens by a machine. So there's virtually no human contact once the bunches have been sorted out.
Okay.
There's virtually no human contact.
Okay, and they're still stored in those wooden barrels or?
So that can happen in the case of certain wines.
Okay.
But most of the fermentation process for, I would say, almost 95% of the wine produced in the world is done first in steel tanks, and then they use the barrels.
Okay.
So because the process is a little different, whether you're making white wine or red wine or rosé wine for that matter. Or even sparkling. So the production processes are different.
For all of these.
Yeah. Due to that, then what material you use or what instruments you use vary according to that.
Okay. And the grapes, I think the green grapes are used for the champagnes or sparkling?
So green skin grapes are used for making white wines. primarily, and white sparkling wines. So still wine and sparkling wines, white
Okay.
colored. And you can use the black skin grapes for making red, rosé, which is your pink colored wine,
Okay.
as well as white wine.
All right. So
Yeah.
what do? They
So the
remove the
skin
color?
is where the color lies actually in the grape.
Okay.
Okay. So if you make use of the skin during the fermentation process, the color gets extracted into the juice.
Okay.
But if you remove the skin
Huh.
and just ferment the juice of black skin grapes, you're going to get a colorless wine. Or if you have a shorter skin contact, you'll have a pink colored wine, because you will extract lesser amount of color pigment into the liquid.
Okay. Wow. So and all these wines are traditional wines, like they've been there since thousands of years, or something have been created now.
Oh wow, no, I think red and white are the oldest of the lot,
Okay.
because those were the natural colors of the grapes.
Huh.
These sparkling wines were, I'm not good with dates, so I don't remember very clearly when it happened. But the sparkling wine was something that they discovered that wines had bubbles, and so they reverse engineered the process to make the champagne style wine.
Wow.
And then from that evolved the other styles of sparkling wines.
Okay.
So, but red and white are what are traditionally referred to as wines.
Yeah. And what role does these barrels play then?
So, okay, to explain where the barrels come in and how they are put to use, I think I need to tell you a little bit about the process itself.
Okay.
If you've tasted grapes by themselves, and most varieties used for making wine have seeds. And the minute you bite into a grape seed, you get that bitter taste, okay, which leaves also an astringent sensation in your mouth. That is what is done when you're making use of the entire fruit for making the wine, which is especially in the case of red wines. You are, during the process of fermentation, extracting color. You are converting the sugar into alcohol, and you're extracting tannins, which are the compounds that gives that bitterness to the seed, and they are also getting extracted into the liquid during the fermentation process. Now these tannins are very sharp initially in taste, which you will know, because if you've bitten into a seed of a grape, you instantly feel that bitterness. But over a period of time, these tannins can soften, in the sense the sharpness dulls out. And so they use barrels in order to soften the harshness of the tannins, as well as to soften the sharpness of the acids which are there in the fruit. And overall to bring the whole liquid together in terms of flavor. So the wood, because it's a porous material, allows minute quantities of air to be exchanged in and out of the barrel. And these minute quantities of air is what actually helps in the aging and the maturation process of the wine. Okay. If I have to give you a parallel example, which makes things very easy for a layperson to understand, is when we make pickles. A freshly made pickle is extremely sharp in flavors, because the spices, you can actually taste them individually. And so, it doesn't feel like it's not a uniform, homogeneous taste. But when we allow that pickle to age for a little bit, so even 10 days from the day of making, the taste has changed, because everything has started softening in terms of sharpness of flavor, but everything has also started coming together.
Correct.
And in the aging process, we also stir the pickle, right? So we basically introduce air into the jar of pickles, which again helps with that. And this is that small quantity of air that you need in the barrel in order for all the flavors to come together and not a bad aroma to develop.
Wow. And these barrels, how long can you use?
So these barrels are made of oak wood. There are different types of oaks because of them growing in different parts of the world.
Right.
They are once they are made into a barrel, they are usually the wood is usually toasted from inside to give additional flavor to the wine.
Okay.
And once you put the wine into a fresh barrel, you can use it for about 3 years. So 3 or 4 years, depending on how the winemaker wants to use that, because it's an expensive thing. Okay, a barrel is not a cheap product.
Right.
But it has only that much of a shelf life, only for the reason that the pores that I've been talking about tend to get clogged from the sediments of the wine.
Okay.
So year 1, year 2, you can still wash them out, but then if the sediment has reached within the pores where there's no access for water to help clean out, then it blocks the passage of air.
Right.
So due to that, then most winemakers never use a barrel if they want the flavor of the wood to help in the maturation process. They won't put it to use after 3 or 4 years.
Wow.
Even if they do, it will be a neutral storage container. It won't bring anything to the wine.
Anything to the wine, right? And I guess in India we won't be using barrels, right? Because we don't.
No, our Indian winemakers use barrels, but they import them because oak wood doesn't grow in India, and certainly not the oak that they use for these barrels.
Right.
So they import the barrels either from the US or from France.
So storing it in a barrel is a must, sort of. I mean,
it's not a must. It's not a must. Okay, I should explain it in another manner. Some grape varieties which are used for making red wines have very high levels of tannin naturally. And when they have this very high level of tannin, the wine is not drinkable immediately.
Correct.
But giving it the barrel maturation treatment helps the wine become drinkable faster, and therefore when they want to make a very high quality wine but also be able to release the wine onto the market with not a very extended maturation, the winemaker will choose to put a part of it in the barrel so that he can actually price it higher, but at the same time also offer a much more refined product to the consumer.
Wow. And all these wines, the white wines and the red wines, can be stored in a barrel to soften it. Or again, it depends.
No. Whites, there are only certain grape varieties which benefit from barrel aging.
Acha.
Not all of them benefit from that. So, it's like, why would you use an expensive container if the product, what you're putting in is not going to benefit from being in that container? So, most white wines are actually aged in tanks.
Okay. And the cork which is used, because nowadays, earlier I remember we used to get wine bottles which would have a cork and we would all struggle removing it. Now you just have a cap.
Correct.
So what is that? Why this change?
Okay, you still get a lot of bottles which have corks.
Okay.
But the change is primarily from two aspects which are important. One is ease of use for the consumer. Okay, a screw cap is any day easier to open. And therefore, especially new markets like India and all the markets where winemaking has not been traditional as an activity, all those markets prefer screw cap bottles.
Okay.
Now, winemakers in Europe do prefer to use corks for their high-end wines. And the reason for that is wine continues to age within the bottle, even when, especially thanks to the cork that is used. Because cork is again a porous material. So it will again allow that exchange of air. Okay, and so the wine will continue to improve and age inside the bottle because of the usage of cork. The bottles that you find now in the market with screw caps are mainly wines which are made for quick consumption, early consumption. Okay, so they are not wines which are made for lasting a long period. Okay, so they're made for consuming within 2 years of their production. Okay, so what you go into the shop and you find a screw cap bottle, it's primarily something that companies want you to consume within 2 years of their production.
Okay.
Do they do bottles with screw cap help in the aging process? Not to the same extent as a bottle with a cork,
Okay.
but wine will still continue to evolve in a bottle which is closed with a screw cap. Okay, so it's not. And the second reason why they've shifted is the economic factor. A cork today costs quite a bit. Okay,
And yeah.
so the cork is actually the bark of a tree called the cork oak.
Okay.
Okay, and it needs about 7 to 9 years for a certain thickness to develop of the bark. After which that bark is stripped off the tree very carefully, and then that bark is cut into those corks that we see
shapes,
to the
yeah,
bottle.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Now, 7 to 9 years is a long duration.
Wow.
Plus, these trees don't grow everywhere. They grow only in Portugal and Spain,
Okay.
and maybe south of France, some part of it.
Okay.
But primarily, a very small area of production. Obviously, then the cork is going to be more expensive. So,
Right.
I know that a cork costs somewhere between 80 cents and €1 per piece.
Per piece.
So it adds to the cost of your bottle.
Correct. Correct.
Whereas a Stelvin cap, which is your screw cap, is very, very cheap.
I'm sure. Yeah,
Okay.
You just have
So the economics also comes into play.
economics also comes.
Other than the customer finding ease of opening the bottle.
Okay. Very basic fundamental question.
Yes.
How to choose a good wine?
Ah.
I remember every time when we would be having alcohol, we'd go to a store like our Dorabjis and all that,
Yeah.
and then call up, okay, which one to pick up? Like there would be like names which Pradeep would speak out, pick up the reserve and whatever, all
Yeah.
those details
Yeah.
he would give out. It would be a
Okay, so I know for a layperson, it does become challenging to pick up a
Yeah.
bottle of wine because A, you need to know the names of grape varieties. And if you know the names of the
Oh.
grape varieties, also you need to know what that grape variety tastes like, right? So
Wow.
it does get a little complex, no doubt. But more often than not, it's best if you're a absolute newbie to wine consumption and buying wines, the best thing is to ask the store to give recommendations.
Okay.
Okay. And preferably go to a store which has some specialists
Collection.
working there
Acha.
who will be able to give you recommendation based
Okay.
on a lot of factors actually, because it's not just the grape variety, it's your budget, because there are wines at different price points. So your budget, your grape variety, the occasion you want it for, is it for your consumption or you're gifting it, all of these elements kind of help you decide the suitable product for purchase.
Right.
Okay. I know it's very painful to
I
think
know.
about it in that manner, but it's let me say it's like when you go clothes shopping, depending on where you want to wear that piece of
So
clothing.
easier to buy clothes than
I know, but depending on which piece of what occasion you want to wear
I know
that
what you're
particular
saying.
thing for,
Yeah.
you will choose the garment accordingly, right? So you're not going to wear a silk sari to your to
Sabji
go and buy vegetables. So it's on the same lines. It's just
Right.
that because you don't know enough about wines as a subject, your parameters are not clear for you.
Correct.
That's the only thing.
So
So you should start with your parameters and then tell the shopkeeper to help you out.
okay. So a mid-range wine, and also again there is like you want it sweeter, you want it.
Correct.
There are those.
Yes, so there's
aspects also.
dry, there is
Dry,
off dry and sweet. So dry is wines which have very low sugar,
Okay.
almost 0 to 5 grams per liter of sugar.
Okay.
Semi-dry or off-dry have a little higher sugar than the dry ones.
Okay.
And then there are the sweet ones which are really sweet. So the minute you have a sip, depending on your, how do I say, penchant for sugar,
Yeah,
you like it or you don't like it. So
Correct.
Yeah.
And then the acidity.
So the
also.
acidity, okay. Dry, when one talks of a dry wine, one is
Yeah.
talking about the sugar level of the wine, huh?
Correct.
Not the acidity level.
Okay.
And I explain this always when I am explaining to freshers or all of those who are learning wines, that think of when you're making a lemonade, right? 3 ingredients that you put to use is lemon juice, sugar, and water, right? Do you put it in the same proportion? No.
No.
Because your sugar could be, say, 1 teaspoon or 1.5 teaspoon. Lemon juice, it will depend on how acidic your lemon is.
Correct.
So it will be either half a lemon, depending on that. And the water is then the most amount, right?
Yeah.
But when you want to adjust the taste, what do you check for first? Do you check for the sugar on it or you check for the lemon juice on it?
I guess it depends, right?
So it has to balance, right?
Yeah.
It has to balance. That is the more important thing. So you will decide based on acidity as well as sugar.
Okay.
You don't check only for one part of it. So which is where acidity and sweetness of the wine.
Yeah.
And in the case of red wines, acidity, sweetness, and the tannins. These 3 elements are what you're looking for.
Okay.
Okay. So if you're sipping a wine for the first time, a white wine, look for how acidic is it.
Okay.
And does it have what is the level of sweetness on the wine?
Okay.
It could be dry, which means it'll have very low sugar.
Okay.
Or it could be off dry, which means there will be some amount of sugar, but it will balance well with the acids.
Okay. Wow.
Even in a dry wine, it does balance well with the acid, okay? Even if there is very low sugar, the acid is then not super sharp.
Okay.
So if the balance is not there, then you are not going to like the dry wine.
Got it.
But if you don't mind that little bit of acidity,
yeah.
but also the low sugar level, you like the wine.
Okay. It's quite complex, and then you have to develop the taste for it, the palate for it.
Yes.
Try out multiple wines and then eventually make a choice.
Absolutely.
Okay, you know what? I think this is good or that.
I still, when I have the opportunity, I make sure that I taste different wines, especially a product that is new to me. I will certainly try and taste it out. It could be a new producer. It could be a new part of the world from where I haven't tried the wines. It could be a grape variety which I've never tried. So it's a lifelong learning experience, honestly.
Wow.
Because it's an ocean of knowledge.
I'm sure.
Okay. So, like just last month, I happened to taste a wine made using a grape variety which is originally Italian but was imported by the Argentinians long back.
Okay.
It gradually died out, but now they've started reviving it.
Okay.
So it was the first time ever that I tried a wine where that grape had been used. So for me, it was again, although I've been tasting wines now for 10 plus years, it was a discovery.
Wow. What finesse you must have on your taste buds, I think, to recognize.
So recognition is something that comes over a period of time and with practice. It doesn't come easily. You really have to focus on the taste and the scent, the smell, because that can vary from grape to grape, the aromas. So it comes with practice.
Okay.
Recognition comes with practice. Yeah. Okay. And I'm nowhere near what a friend of mine was capable of doing.
You mentioned, 2 different geographical locations, right? So, which part in the world produces the maximum amount of wine? Or which is
Europe. Europe remains the largest, still where the maximum production happens. In Europe, Spain, Italy, and France are the 3 main producers of wine. And of course, the ranking changes as per the year. Sometimes it is Spain producing more wine than Italy. Sometimes Italy, sometimes it's France. In terms of consumption, also Europe still remains the highest consuming geography of the world.
Wow. What about India? Where any particular part in India where wine is produced?
So in India, in Maharashtra produces about 85% of the wine produced in the country.
Wow. Oh, okay. We
Yeah,
are on the forefront, and I
yeah.
guess this change happened in the last what,
From the 80s.
80s.
Yeah,
Okay,
1980s.
is when we
Because
started.
Chateau Indege was the first winery that was set up in
Okay,
Narayanggaon.
okay,
After Chateau Indege came in Grover Vineyards, which was set up in Bangalore, outside of Bangalore.
okay.
And then the third producer was Sula.
All right.
After Sula came in, there were a lot of many
Players.
more.
Yeah,
Unfortunately, not all of them have survived.
survived. Yeah.
But I think the ones who have survived were the people who were anyway making good quality wine.
Okay, okay.
So that's how they've survived.
Wow. And needless to say, the soil matters, the weather matters. It plays a big role in the production, right? So every year,
Yes,
now that we have random weather changes, I guess, and that's happening across the globe
globe.
probably, it would have an impact on the grape
It does.
production
It
and the
does.
taste also,
It
right?
does. So climate change is, I think, one of the biggest concerns of wine producers, especially in Europe.
Okay,
Uh, One reason being that the temperatures are rising,
okay.
and which was not the case in Europe
Yeah,
earlier.
yeah.
And so certain grape varieties don't thrive well in warmer climates by warmer temperatures. So that is a big concern for them. The second thing is, of course, the random rainfall that happens, which impacts our vineyards also quite a bit.
Yeah.
And with rainfall, the biggest damage that happens is loss of crop, especially if it rains after the budding stage of the fruit. Because at that point, the buds are still very delicate, and if that's when you have
Right.
rainfall, everything gets washed out. And the third big problem is hailstorms, which we don't face as much in India, but in Europe,
In
it
Europe?
happens quite frequently.
Okay. Oh wow, must be quite a challenge.
Yeah, it is a challenging business to be in,
You
honestly.
can't keep it like covered partially with the green nets that we get here in India. Something similar, they don't. It's too big a
multiple
area.
acres of land. How are you going to
Yeah.
cover them?
Yeah,
Though,
big
though do
areas.
they do use in the northern vineyards of France during the cold periods, they do use those those burners we have in restaurants.
I've seen that in movies.
Yes.
Yes.
So they use those if they are anticipating a cold front to come in, especially April, May, March, April is the period in France or in Europe where winter is dying out, but suddenly before actual spring hits in, there's a cold front that comes in. So for that, they do use those very often. And they do use nets, but they use nets to protect from birds eating the fruit rather than protection from
Hailstorm.
climate.
Okay, okay, okay. Yeah, I've seen that. I mean, one movie that I remember is Walk in the Clouds, Keanu Reeves.
Correct.
There was the first movie which I saw, which was about
around vineyards, yes.
And Keanu Reeves, of course. I was
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
watching every bit in detail. So there I've seen them do all of that.
So
and
they,
stuff,
the heat. So basically the thing is that you don't allow the temperature to go so cold that, especially it helps with the hailstorm, right? So that I won't go into the scientific side of how hail occurs and all of that, but you don't want those pelting snowballs to come and hit on your bunches which are just about setting.
Correct, correct.
Because that then ensures that there is, firstly, you lose the crop then and there, or if it rains, it's very quick for fungus to set in, especially if the fruit is on the is at the ripening stage.
Okay.
And if fungus sets in, then you lose the crop.
All
So
right.
those are the things they have to be watchful for.
Okay. Now, very interesting. Okay, I'm very curious to know, how do you pair the wines with our Indian foods? Because we have so many spices in our Indian kitchen.
Wow, now that is such a complex subject. It's not easy. I mean, honestly, back in the day when they used to say, red wine, red meat, white wine, white meat, it worked okay for the European style of cooking till a certain stage, I would say. But even today, I can tell you, you can't really use that rule, because even European chefs have started integrating influences from rest of the world into the way they cook.
Oh,
So
yeah.
you will have Asian ingredients like soy sauce or miso paste or spices which are included into their dishes. And so it's not always a black and white kind of pairing scenario.
Right.
And with Indian food, I mean, it's
Difficult,
enough to
no?
drive any sane person
Yeah.
crazy trying to figure out what is going to pair with what kind of food. Especially, I mean, if you just think, I'll let's talk about a very simple ingredient, which is potato, right? North to south, east to west, potato is cooked in God knows how many
How many?
thousands of ways,
Yes. Yes.
right? Boiled, sauteed, in gravy, the kind of
Yeah.
spices that are added to it. And so it's always complicated to explain a potato based dish, because you can say aloo matar, okay, you can say it is aloo matar, but even aloo matar can be cooked in so many
So
different
many
ways.
different ways. Yeah. Yeah.
And so that's where it gets
Tricky.
very, very challenging. Okay, so to give a layperson guidelines is that if your dish has got light flavors,
Okay.
use a lighter flavored wine. If your dish has got fuller flavors, use a fuller flavored wine to pair.
Okay. Okay.
It could be red or white,
Okay.
but most safe wines to pair with Indian food is white wines,
Okay.
which have a certain level of acidity. For the simple reason that all our spices tend to be a little on the higher side in our dishes, and the acidity of the wine then helps to balance out the spiciness of the dish.
Okay.
And that, I think, is a good starting point. Or you can use even a sparkling wine which has slight amount of sweetness to it. That also works well with Indian dishes.
Okay.
If you want to be more accurate, then you need to know what the dish actually is, and
Yeah,
then
yeah.
decide the wine accordingly.
Yeah. Yeah. In general, this is, yeah, because this is quite challenging, I know. I mean, to figure out, as you rightly said, so many varieties and so many ways of cooking.
Exactly.
So, what's with wine and cheese? People have like a good cheese board spread and all of that, and then they have wine with it.
Yeah.
So, cheeses go well with wine, or it's
Cheeses do
just-
go well with wine. Depends on what kind of cheese is it. If it's cheese has got, most cheese has about 30 to 40% fat.
fat.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the reason wine works well with it is because also, again, the acidity in the wine helps cut down the fat of the cheese. When I say cut down, it does not
Absorption.
reduce it, or does not
People
even
will start
does not even reduce the absorption, but it cuts it down on your palate, so it doesn't leave behind a layer of fat when you
Yeah.
have cheese.
Yeah.
Your tongue is not coated with a layer of fat if you have wine with it. So the acidity of the wine helps clear out the fat layer that can get deposited when you're eating certain kinds of cheeses.
I think I'm going to make a reel out of this so that people know. Otherwise, people will sit with a blob of cheese and wine.
No, it does not. Unfortunately, it does not do anything to the calorie intake. I wish it would. I would be having cheese and wine every day, but that's not happening. Still have to be careful.
Yeah.
And so, but if you see old images, they always show red wine and cheese. I personally prefer white wine with cheese.
Okay.
Because I feel the tannins in the red wines don't work with the lactic flavors of the cheese.
Okay. Oh, all that. Huh?
But, to each his own.
Yeah.
Honestly, after a point, it's really to each his own. You can only give guidelines. I don't think you should impose them.
Right.
Because you don't know what
Everyone
each
has.
one's taste buds enjoys.
Absolutely. And the older the wine, the better it is. Aged, the reserves, and
That works only for certain red varieties.
Okay.
Not for all wines.
Okay.
As I said earlier, majority of the wines made today are for quick consumption. Right?
Okay.
2 years, within 2 years of production. Certain grape varieties last long because they have a high tannin level. So, for example, Cabernet Sauvignon, Malbec, Grenache, Tempranillo, Sangiovese, these are certain grape varieties which naturally have higher tannins.
Okay.
And that's the reason why they last longer.
Okay.
because it takes longer for those tannins to soften down to a certain level. And obviously, the longer it takes, that much your wine is going to last better.
Right, right. All these names that you took were the names of the grapes.
Yes, they're
Because
grape
on many
varieties.
bottles we see these names.
Correct. These are grape
Yeah.
variety names. Just like in mangoes, we have different varieties of mangoes.
Yeah.
Whether it's Alfonso or the Sherry, Langda, Neelam, Totapuri.
Yeah.
Grapes also have
Varieties.
names,
Yeah.
and their flavors are also different. Okay. Like Alfonso's sweetness cannot be compared with the sweetness of Totapuri.
Correct.
Totapuri hardly develops any sweetness,
Yeah.
even when it's fully ripe,
Yeah.
versus Alfonso, which is dripping in sugar. It's the same thing with grapes. Certain grape varieties will naturally have higher acidity or higher tannin and will ripen faster, ripen slower, all of that happens. But it's exactly, I mean, I think the best parallel for an Indian consumer is to give them examples of mango varieties. Because again, we don't use all the varieties of mangoes for eating.
Right.
Right? There are certain specific varieties which are used only for pickle making.
Correct.
Or for making your murabba and all of that, right?
Yes.
So it's the same logic.
Okay.
It's absolutely the same logic. Same principle of how you do things. We are just not familiar with the variety names. That's the only reason why it gets confusing for us.
Correct, correct. And there's so many of them.
There are
have there
10,000 varieties of wine that have been of wine grapes that have been identified.
So far.
Yeah. And these are only wine grapes because this is a different family from the grapes we eat as fruit salad or as a fruit.
Yeah.
So only the wine making varieties, some 10,000 exist.
Okay. In India, how many varieties exist?
In India, I would assume, I mean, most wine making varieties have had to be imported.
We don't make you that.
We don't, I mean, we didn't have
because
grapes.
we're not a wine making country anymore.
We were at one time. We were. In the 19th century, there was a disease which attacked the vineyards in Europe.
Okay.
And this was actually a virus which attacked the roots of the grapevines.
Okay.
And because it attacked the roots, obviously, if the roots are dying, then the plant is not going to survive. So almost all of the vineyards in Europe were wiped out.
Okay.
And fortunately for European folks, people had migrated to countries like Chile and Argentina, so they could bring back the rootstock from there.
Okay.
In India, also it is said that our vineyards got destroyed at that time.
Okay.
Because if you happen to see the old Mughal paintings and things like that, you'll always see a wine glass. So wine was very much being consumed in India. It is not that it was not there. It's just that after the vineyards got destroyed with this disease, as luck would have it, the British came in with their whiskies and they dominated our drinking culture with whiskey for so many years.
Right.
They still dominate.
Yeah.
So, which is where the wine thing completely got erased from public memory. And it got reintroduced only in the 80s.
Okay.
When companies like Chateau Indage and Grover Vineyards started making wines in India.
So did they have to get the plant from
they got the plant.
And then they
got the plants.
Okay.
They got the plants, and it's a very long and tedious process when you import plants. So the plants have to be brought in. They go through a cooling period in some place where they are actually quarantined, because you don't want any infection coming from any other source and spread it across the soil of our land. So they are quarantined before they are released for plantation in the Indian agricultural farms.
Okay. Wow. And then keeping the weather in mind, like probably in Chennai, maybe the weather would be different.
Yeah.
So crops.
So I don't think there is a winery in Tamil Nadu though. I must say that there is one winery somewhere near Madurai that I've heard of.
Okay.
And strangely, there's one winery somewhere near Ratlam. In MP. So, there are wineries in the country where one would least expect it, but they're there. And just last month, I got to know that somebody has set up a winery in Jabalpur.
Okay.
Yeah, so things are happening. It's just that one doesn't hear of them as frequently.
So, what's a suitable climate for these
Actually,
plants?
grapes grow anywhere where,
Okay.
grapes don't need a fertile soil.
Okay.
Grapes actually grow better in harsher conditions. If you know the origin of the grape wine, it's actually said to be Iran or Iraq, that belt, where it's all dry, right? So the grape does not require fertile soil.
Okay.
It does need certain amount of water, not a whole lot. So it's not like sugarcane where it needs a lot of water. And so grapes can be grown literally anywhere. Just
Okay.
not in clay, very highly clayey soils, because then the water retention would be too
Bit
high.
too high.
But sandy soils work, rocky soils work,
Wow.
even calcareous soils work,
What is
because
calcareous?
calcareous soil is soil which is very high in calcium. So if you
Ah.
had to go to Champagne region in France, it is completely calcareous soil. I mean, you could pick up a stone from the ground and you can start writing with it, because it's very high
Okay.
in calcium. It's like chalk,
Wow.
very
And
chalky.
people must be like probably
Yeah, if you take, I mean, like if you remember
like
your childhood days of
childhood days and
licking a piece of chalk, it is exactly like that.
Wow. Okay.
And in some wines, you can actually taste that chalk,
Oh, you can?
because the intensity of the calcium is so much that you can get that chalky taste on the wine.
Wow. Now you've taken me to another area, which is I have seen people taste the wine in a very weird way. They sip it and then they roll it around or whatever. So what is how do you guys taste
So
wine?
this is okay. The steps of tasting are actually how we taste anything and everything. Okay, it's just that we don't pay attention.
Huh.
But the three senses, three main senses that come into use are your eyes, your smell, and of course your taste.
Okay.
Okay, and the reason you do that is to be able to get the best concentration of flavor that you can.
Yeah.
So when you first smell it, you smell it for making out whether there's any defect on it or not.
Okay.
The first wave is you're trying to identify there's no defect. Okay, when you smell it the second time, that's when you try and figure out, okay, there's no defect, but what am I getting on it? So am I getting
Okay.
fruity aromas? Am I getting floral aromas? Am I getting even animal aromas? Because sometimes you do get leather and meaty aromas on the wines. On very old reds, you get that.
Okay.
So, but honestly, the first time you smell a wine is to ensure that there's nothing wrong with it and that it can be consumed.
Okay.
And then when you take that first sip and you let it, you roll it around in your mouth, it's just to ensure that all your taste buds are coated with the flavors of the wine, so that you can actually taste everything properly. And in case there's a defect, some part of your mouth is going to identify that there is a defect or a problem with the wine.
Wow.
That's it.
And then the rolling or
When you swirl the wine,
swirling of
yeah.
wine,
So when you swirl the wine in the glass, basically the swirling movement, oxidation. One is the exchange of air, exposure to the air, and secondly, with doing that, all the aroma molecules tend to rise up, right? So even when we are cooking, when we stir in the pot, that's when you get the maximum wave of aromas.
Right.
So because the stirring action causes the aroma molecules to rise.
Got it.
And why you swirl in a glass is also because if it's a freshly opened bottle, you have to think of it this way, that the wine has been sitting in the bottle for whatever duration of time. So it could be 6 months, it could be a year. But in that period, what happens is the wine tends to sort of close in on itself. Okay, I'm going into lazy mode. I'm not expressing myself. You do that and it starts waking up and it starts showing its true aromas and colors.
Okay. Wow.
Flavors, not colors, but flavors.
Yeah, but true colors also.
Yeah. Within inverted
Pun
commas.
intended, yes.
Yeah.
So you initially mentioned animal
Aromas.
How does that happen?
This is what is referred to as tertiary aromas.
Okay.
So primary aromas are aromas that develop from the fruit itself.
Okay.
So you'll have fruit aromas, the grape, and it's grape only. It's nothing's been added, right? So only grape juice.
Okay.
But when you say primary, it's because that is what comes from the fermentation process.
Okay.
The secondary aromas come from the aging process. And the tertiary ones actually develop from a very long aging. So extended aging will give those aromas. It's not easy to explain this in very lay terms.
Yeah.
But
I get you what you're trying to tell me. Yeah.
So even for example, cheese or pickles for that matter, they will develop a certain aroma if they've
Absolutely.
been in the jar for a very long time.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
it's all that comes into play.
Okay.
So it's a lot of chemistry and microbiology if you have to dissect it in the scientific way.
Right. So how long did you take to develop your taste buds for getting the aromas, getting familiar with different aromas and the taste?
See, you and I both have been developing our taste buds from childhood, right?
Yeah.
Because we've been tasting stuff right from the word go, correct?
Correct.
To identify aromas is a different thing because it's a conscious decision of your brain that, okay, I want to identify A, B, C, D aromas. I want to taste A, B, C, D tastes